This documentary regards to 3 of the many important Supreme Court cases dealing with our civil rights. Now, even in today's world, we still struggle with many problems involving our civil rights. But because of these cases and the fight they and many others have caused, we have it a lot less challenging. The specific cases I'm speaking about are Brown v. Board of Education, Plessy v. Ferguson, and Dred Scott v. Sandford. All of these cases have caused and carried out many benefits for our lives, affecting us even today. Now to get started, we have Brown v. Board of Education. Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka was a landmark 1954 Supreme Court case. In this case, the justices ruled unanimously that racial segregation of children in public schools was unconstitutional. Brown v. Board of Education was one of the cornerstones of the civil rights movement and helped establish the precedent that separate but equal education and other services were not, in fact, equal at all. The reason why it's still important in today's world is simply because your friends, family, and even you may not have been treated and allowed the same opportunities that we have today. Many people that impact our lives in the school community are of different races and come from different backgrounds. If it wasn't for this ruling, how would we know it would be the same today? This may not have been possible, and times could have been a lot more different. Education was not at all the same before this ruling. It would have been very, very different than from today because of segregation. As you can see on the screen, the first image to the left is a quote by the U.S. Supreme Court, basically stating that in pertaining to education, the phrase separate but equal cannot be true. This is simply because ultimately, no matter what happens, it will still be unequal. The image on the right depicts the United States prior to the Brown v. Board of Education case, and it states on the matter of educational segregation. The red states required segregation, blue states were optional or limited to it, the yellow had no legislation to it, and green states it was forbidden. You can see how bad the South really was, most of it being made up of these red states and some blue. The Plessy v. Ferguson case occurred on May 18, 1896, when Plessy refused to leave the whites-only car. He was arrested because he refused to sit in a black-only car. Plessy had violated Louisiana's Separate Car Act of 1890, which required equal but separate railroad accommodations for white and non-white passengers. He described himself as 7/8 Caucasian and 1/8 African blood. Plessy was charged with boarding a whites-only train, and his lawyers argued that the regulation was unconstitutional during this trial. The court upheld Plessy's conviction after he lost the trial. He later took his case to the United States Supreme Court. Plessy argued that the segregation legislation violated the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, which prohibits states from denying equal protection of the laws to any person within their authority. After bringing his case to the U.S. Supreme Court, their decision was with 7 votes for Ferguson and 1 vote against. The Supreme Court ruled that mandatory racial segregation was not in violation of the 14th Amendment. Over the next half-century, the Plessy v. Ferguson case decision upheld the concept of racial segregation. The verdict justified segregation on trains and buses, as well as in public places like hotels, theaters, and schools. It was not until May 17, 1954, in the Brown v. Board of Education case, that they overturned this ruling, deciding that state laws restricting equal access to education based on race were unconstitutional under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Guarantee. Separate is considered unequal. Dred Scott was a slave in Missouri from 1833 to 1843. He resided in Illinois, a free state, and the Louisiana Territory, where slavery was forbidden by the Missouri Compromise of 1820. After returning to Missouri, Scott filed a lawsuit in the court for his freedom, claiming that his residence in free territory made him a free man. After losing, Scott brought a new lawsuit to the federal court. Scott's master maintained that no descendant of slaves could be a citizen in the sense of Article 3 of the Constitution. One quote that should stick out when learning about this case is, "And if anything in relation to the construction of the Constitution can be regarded as settled, it is the word citizen and the word people," said by Chief Justice Taney. This quote shows that according to the Constitution and according to the liberties of the United States, the phrase citizen means more than just belonging to the U.S. The term citizen should include the rights and privileges provided for everyone else, no matter what race or color.